Has the United States called Beijing's bluff, or has it provoked China in what could escalate into a new global military conflagration? I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. Our focus today, of course, is on that dramatic visit by Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan, the highest ranking American official to visit the self ruled country in 25 years. China has been huffing and puffing quite literally and has responded with military drills that have encircled Taiwan, with Japan cautioning China against this response. There's a lot to unpack on what might happen next. Has America quite literally called Beijing's bluff, or is the worst yet to come? And will the Americans discover the full consequence of this visit only after Miss Pelosi is back at home? That is our focus on the program today. Also, of course, what all of this means for our region, for us in India. Remember, India and China still at loggerheads in the high reaches of eastern Ladakh, that conflagration and the Chinese aggression showing no signs at all of de escalating. So, whatever happens next could have a big consequence on the entire world order. So, let's introduce our panel of experts today. Joining us from Taiwan today is Sana Hashmi. She's a senior fellow at the Taiwan-Asia Exchange Foundation. Welcome to the program, Ms. Hashmi. Also joining us from the United States of America today is Lisa Curtis, a senior strategic affairs analyst who has previously served with the Trump administration. Welcome to the program, ma'am. Also joining us, Ambassador Arun Singh, a veteran diplomat who has served as India's ambassador to the United States. And finally joining us is author and security affairs analyst, Dr. Happymon Jacob. It's great to see all of you. We hope also to have a Taiwanese legislator join us on the program as we go along. But let's first bring in initial comments from you, Ms. Hashmi, Sana, since you're on the ground in Taiwan. Of course, we know that Taiwan lit up. It quite literally hearted Nancy Pelosi. Those were very powerful images we saw. But now that she's gone and the Chinese are quite literally encircling Taiwan, is there a sense of anxiety on the ground in Taiwan? How are you seeing this visit?
Well, I don't think there is any anxiety or panic in Taiwan. In fact, on the contrary, I see there was a lot of excitement when Pelosi was arriving, and we
Can you
saw how.
can you just can you just hold your mic up? Can you just hold your mic up a bit? And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was saying that I don't see any sense of anxiety or any sense of panic in Taiwan. There was, in fact, everyone around was very excited about Pelosi. Be the leadership or the people in Taiwan, they have been very receptive of this idea of Pelosi visiting Taiwan. And even if you look at social media, even if you look at this tweet, everyone is talking about that. People are really politically charged in Taiwan. So it's a topic that everyone has been discussing. And I think the visit has been very well received in Taiwan. So whatever we are seeing on the internet, it's not really true. There is no panic. And I think the military has already said that we are prepared for whatever is going to come from tomorrow. So I think we just have to wait and watch. But certainly there's no panic in Taiwan.
But in terms of waiting and watching what may come next, what is the anticipation? What is the expectation? We're seeing the Chinese talk about military sort of drills in the high seas that are already encircling the self-ruled island of Taiwan. What are you expecting? You know, you've got your ear to the ground. What are you expecting to happen?
I don't think there's going to be any direct confrontation between US and China over Taiwan right now. And there are several reasons behind that. Of course, domestic reasons are there. But I think fourth crisis might happen later, but this is not the time for the fourth crisis to happen. So whatever is happening right now, and even from tomorrow, the exercise and the intimidation, coercion is primarily because what China, first of all, it can't really backtrack. China really overreacted to the visit of Pelosi. Congressional visits have been happening for a very, very long time. So it's not something that has not happened before. There's nothing new. There's no departure from the past. So I think now that they have overreacted, they have to follow through that. So they can't really go for a war. This is not the right time. China is not really going to go for a war that Xi Jinping is not going to win right now. So I believe that what they're going to do is they're going to intimidate Taiwan more. And this is one of the best alternatives for them to have an exercise and to encircle Taiwan, primarily to showcase that tomorrow, if the US tries to go ahead and increases the exchanges, then China can really block Taiwan, and the US won't be able to send help. So I think this is one of the reasons why we are going to see this exercise from tomorrow.
Yeah, but is there going to be more than an exercise? I think that's the question. Lisa, the view from Washington, there's been bipartisan support for Ms. Pelosi's visit. She's earned praise even from Fox News. But when you unpack the consequences of this, what do the Americans now have to stand by on alert for? What concerns you the most, or do you believe that this has been a highly successful visit? Ms. Pelosi's flight was the most tracked flight in recent memory in the world. How are you seeing this visit?
Well, I think even though she's a congressional member, congressional delegations go to Taiwan all the time. Of course, she's the Speaker of the House, the third most powerful person in the United States. So there hasn't been a House Speaker that's visited Taiwan in 25 years. So we have to acknowledge this is a change. But I think at the same time, there's sort of a broad sense that because China has been acting so provocatively toward Taiwan over the last several months, that it was necessary to show support to the Taiwan people. And so that is how the visit is largely being seen here. In terms of preparing for what's to come, I think, our U.S. military planners have expected a Chinese reaction. So this can't come as a surprise, this virtual blockade and military exercises surrounding Taiwan. So I'm sure that the U.S. military is, on high alert, is just observing what's happening, but also we have to hope that there would be some sort of back channel reaching out, perhaps General Milley to his counterpart in China to try to keep things calm and prevent anything from devolving to a conflict situation, because this is a time where miscalculation could happen, and so it's an extremely tense time. And I don't think that the Chinese are going to forget this. I think this is something that has embarrassed President Xi, and that they will not soon forget that this happened. And so we're going to have to deal with the fallout and the consequences of this visit.
And you do believe that in some ways Xi Jinping has been undermined and he will look for ways to retaliate. That retaliation may not be immediate. The question is, do you think it will be militaristic, Lisa?
Well, I don't necessarily think it's, I think the militaristic side of the response is going to be directed at Taiwan. I don't think it necessarily will be directed at the United States, but there will likely be other ways that we will see a kind of retaliation. What will be interesting is to see if the dialogue continues. There was, of course, a long conversation between President Biden and President Xi just a week or so ago. But the interesting thing will be to watch is whether that continues, whether they allow that kind of communication to continue. If they do, I think that's a good sign that we could eventually get over this hump. But if not, I think that we have to be very careful and just ensure that the high level of tensions does not devolve into conflict.
Let me bring in Ambassador Arun Singh. Is it my imagination? Am I joining dots that don't exist? Or would you say that there are two things that have happened in the last 48 hours? There is the American announcement that Al Zawahiri has been taken out in a US drone strike from Pakistan, raising all sorts of other questions. And now there is Ms. Pelosi's chutzpah in basically literally walking, as it were, into the lion's den, despite Xi Jinping saying, don't come or else. What are you seeing here? Is there a kind of attempt by the Americans to reassert their somewhat diminished, previously diminished image as the global superpower? Or is this more realistically somebody stepping up to call the Chinese bluff?
So I think the two events certainly coincided in time, but were not necessarily linked by design. And as far as Speaker Pelosi's visit is concerned, I've been watching the debate in the U.S. Related to Taiwan, and for quite some time there has been a section arguing that gradually China is squeezing Taiwan more and more than what the U.S. has had envisaged in terms of the agreement it had done with China or in terms of the US commitments in the Taiwan Relations Act. And for example, more and more countries around the world have been enticed by China, persuaded by China, assistance given to those countries to break off diplomatic relations with Taiwan. And Taiwan's participation in international organizations, including the WHO, was gradually being stopped. So there was a sense developing in some sections in the US that at some stage, a stop had to be put to this. And Taiwan's international engagement profile needed to be brought about in terms of, as they saw it, in terms of the US commitments in the Taiwan Relations Act. So that debate certainly has been playing out. And if you saw, even at the time of the Trump administration, there were high-level visits that had been authorized. Some Taiwanese leaders had been allowed to come to the US or transit through the US. And even in the Biden administration, there had been high-level visits. So I think that was one element of the messaging. And then there is the domestic politics. The US is going in for congressional elections at the end of this year. And according to most reports, the Democrats are in trouble in terms of maintaining their majority in the House and even in the Senate. And so this visit by Speaker Pelosi would be a message that she takes certain firm positions. The Democrats are firm in terms of the approach to China. And this is an area where there is bipartisan support in the US in terms of the China relationships. As you mentioned, 25 senators have come out with a statement in support of Speaker Pelosi. And recently, the CHIPS Act was passed. And one of the pegs was for passing that act to strengthen the semiconductor industry in the US was the competition with China. So I think all these elements are playing out. And again, you'd recall that on a couple of occasions, President Biden himself said that the US was committed to coming to the defense of Taiwan, not just strengthening Taiwan to be able to defend itself. So there are pressures playing out also in the US in maintaining Taiwan's status.
Let me ask you before I come to Happymon, from an Indian perspective, we've been very cautious on paper. We still, as the Americans do, sort of affirm the one China policy. But given what's playing out between India and China, the military conflagration in the high reaches of the Himalayas, what has just happened in Taiwan? Do you think that this will trigger some sort of shift in India, and should it?
Well, not at this stage. I think really the Taiwan issue itself is something that the US first and then Japan, they would be in the lead in handling. And you've seen that the Japanese have come out with several statements in terms of how they see unacceptability of Chinese positions and behavior related to Taiwan. So I think they would certainly be handling that aspect. But, interestingly, in terms of its response to Speaker Pelosi's visit, the Chinese have said that, what they see as sovereignty and territorial integrity is being challenged and they need to come out with a certain position. Now, from India's perspective, India says China is violating India's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Or we take the China-Pakistan economic corridor. That is a clear violation of India's sovereignty and territorial integrity. And therefore, there would be an argument in India that there is a clear double standard in the Chinese position. And of course, countries take positions based on how they see their interests playing out. And recently, when China and Pakistan tried to reach out to Afghanistan to join CPEC, there was a statement from the Indian External Affairs Ministry that this would be gross interference in India's internal affairs and sovereign position. So I think we would certainly see that Chinese position they are taking on Taiwan conflicts with how they are behaving vis-a-vis in the context of India in terms of J&K and Pakistan.
Yeah, and I mean, who can forget the stapled visas that the Chinese were giving to residents of Jammu and Kashmir? I actually want to take that back to Lisa, but I want to bring in Happymon first. We also should say that despite the mounting US-China tensions, the trade relations actually do remain pretty robust. In fact, imports from China have actually gone up between 2019 and 2021. Happymon.
Barkha, it is interesting to note that Taiwan and China have a very strong trading partnership. In fact, the trade deficit is in Taiwan's favor. There's a lot more investment in China by Taiwanese than the other way around. So this is in many ways an interdependent economic relationship, and yet the Taiwanese have not really backed down in any way because of this major economic relationship. I think it has lessons for India. India is not Taiwan. India is a much bigger country. And China's territorial claims vis-a-vis India are far less serious than its territorial claims vis-a-vis Taiwan. And India is a huge military power with nuclear weapons. And yet, our policymakers are far more careful in calling the Chinese out, far more careful in calling the Chinese bluff. And this is something that I don't understand. So looking at what is unfolding in Taiwan, my own feeling is that we have major lessons to draw from this incident for our own sake. To begin with, for example, articulate your own red lines and positions in an unambiguous manner. Sometimes people make this argument that Indians have themselves not said that our territory is being captured by the Chinese. So how are we going to sort of try and support you politically or diplomatically? Secondly, I think backing down under Chinese pressure is not something that anyone should be doing. And I think Taiwan has actually shown us a great example of not really backing down. So I think the lessons that India has to learn from this particular incident are several. Calling China's bluff, and as I said earlier, India is a powerful country. If India can't call Chinese bluff on the Himalayas, as you pointed out earlier, Barkha, that's on us. We haven't yet spoken out loud and clear that China is an illegal occupation of Indian territory. So I think these are things that one has to keep in mind and not really fall into this trap or the argument that we have major trade going on with China and therefore we can't sort of compromise that. So does Taiwan. So does the United States of America. So I think do business with China, but not only on China's terms. It has to be mutually sort of decided upon.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because we've almost forgotten, or our headlines have almost forgotten, that our soldiers are still standing eyeball to eyeball with the Chinese, who have basically yet again attempted to alter the status quo when it comes to the line of actual control in Ladakh. But Lisa, let me take this back to you. I think Happymon's making the point that the trading relationship can coexist alongside these mounting geopolitical tensions. And in India, we don't actually understand that. We don't understand how to wrap our heads around that. Do you think that the trade between US China is a kind of paradox in this? And when you said Xi Jinping will not forget this, what is your sort of understanding of how China will look to strike back? And will it strike back only against the Taiwanese and not against the Americans? I mean, how do you read this?
Well, I think that's an excellent question. I don't think anybody can answer it precisely. But there are things that China can do, whether it's some kind of cyber attack or they can do many things to sort of make clear that they're conducting the activity, but it wouldn't be something that would rise to the level of causing a conflict. So I think there are many things they can do sort of under the radar that will show their unhappiness, and the U.S. would be able to read it as retaliation for the visit. But I don't think it would rise to the level of causing actual conflict between China and the United States. But it's interesting when you raise India and the trade issue compared to the military tensions. It's a bit different in that China, wants to be able to have trade with India, but yet sort of tweak it on the border and, as you said, try to change the territorial status quo. But India in 2020 stood up to that proposition and basically said, no, it's all connected. If you're putting pressure on the border, that's going to impact our overall trade relationship. They, of course, banned several Chinese apps, decided to not allow Chinese companies to participate in 5G trials, put restrictions on Chinese investment in the country. So I think India has stood up to China, particularly in 2020. And that was a good example for the region. to see that. And of course, the U.S. would want to be as supportive as possible to India in being able to stand up to the Chinese. The U.S. looks to India to stand up to the Chinese in that way. But I think, your question about what this means in terms of the Chinese response in the United States, I think that there could be something related to, trade ties. There are, things that the Chinese could probably do on the economic front, but the challenge there is it would also hurt China to a certain degree. And they are having their own economic struggles right now with all the COVID shutdowns. So my sense is I would doubt they would do anything on the economic front that could cause them just as much harm.
Well, that would be then a major sort of moment for the United States of America if there is no significant payback, as it were, or if the payback, and this is a cruel thing to say, but if the payback were confined, Sana, to the Taiwanese and didn't actually travel all the way up to the United States of America, then in a sense, the Americans have lost nothing and have actually, with their audacity, with Nancy Pelosi's audacity, actually come away, with a lot to be pleased about. What is the worst case scenario that people in Taiwan, or the government in Taiwan, the administration rather in Taiwan, may be anticipating or apprehending?
I don't think they're really looking at the worst case scenario right now. But one of the problems is, and we are already seeing what's happening, how China is weaponizing the trade. China has been weaponizing the trade specifically since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have seen how they have banned Taiwanese custard apples, pineapples, and yesterday they banned 100 Taiwanese food snacks manufacturers. And today there were further bans on imports of Taiwanese fruits as well as fish as well. So this is just going to increase. And there's a lot of, as Professor Happymon Jacob also mentioned, there's a lot of interdependence, specifically in the economic field. There's a lot of Taiwanese investment that's in China. And since 2016, specifically with the initiation of the new southbound policy that is aimed at South Asian countries, Tsai Ing-wen administration has asked the Taiwanese investors to pull out of China and invest in Taiwan, in Southeast Asian countries, and even in India. But of course, it has been difficult for them. They're also incentivizing the companies right now. But I feel that whatever is happening right now, it's a blessing in disguise. There's a wake-up call for Taiwanese businesses as well, that now they have to really pull out of China. Otherwise, there's always a thing that private sector is very different from the government. They think very differently. But I think after what is happening now, they're actually targeting Taiwanese people. They're targeting Taiwanese businesses. And I think this is one of the things that is actually leading to the change in perception among Taiwanese and among Taiwanese businesses. So I feel that there's a wake-up call, and now they're going to look at countries such as Vietnam, Philippines, and even India. So I think this is also an opportunity for countries like India.
Yeah, let me take that to Ambassador Arun Singh. When I say we, I mean India as a state, be more involved, or should we keep silent as we have? There are many opportunities for India here, and many access to grind with the Chinese, but there are many things happening simultaneously. There is speculation that the Pakistanis are back in business with Washington, that Zawahiri could not have been taken out without Pakistan collaboration. We don't know, but that's the speculation. There's Pakistan functioning as a sort of vassal state of China. There's China among the first countries to meet with and engage with the Taliban. And now there is the American chutzpah and assertion in Taiwan. If you were to step back and look at the big picture and the ripple effect, what do you see?
So first, going by past experience, I doubt if the US would have shared with Pakistan that they were going to take out with Zawahiri, because their experience has been that such information has been leaked by the Americans to the various terrorist groups. The Zawahiri was found in a safe house of a group led by Sirajuddin Haqqani, who is completely linked to the ISI. So I doubt if that kind of information sharing would have been there. Of course, I think the US has a certain dependence on Pakistan because all the drones flying into Afghanistan, US drones, have to overfly Pakistan. So that dependence is certainly there, and that's something that we need to factor in. Pakistan also has a dependence on the US. Their economic situation is very difficult. If they want a bailout from the IMF, they need US to be supportive. But I think in the context of Taiwan itself, clearly it doesn't make sense for us to get directly involved in the debate related to that situation. Even if you see the Europeans are by and large silent. saying nothing, although they are a very strong ally of the US in the context of transatlantic security. But we should watch more closely the reshoring of supply chains, because after what has happened in Europe, many US companies, European companies are looking at new supply chains. But so far, they had not really moved out of China. Despite the posture in the Trump administration, despite what happened under COVID, investment had continued to go up, trade was increasing. But people were asking the question, especially those who were hit, a business that were hit by developments in Europe, how far should they continue relying on the China business opportunity? And I think if there is anxiety, growing anxiety related to the Taiwan situation, more and more businesses would want to look at options other than China. So I think there is an opportunity there that we should focus on because I think the signal from India, including from the government clearly, is that they want to play an important role in the reshoring of supply chains that is taking place so that the Indian economy can get a further boost.
Okay, let me bring in Happymon, and then I'll give Lisa Curtis the last word as we wrap. Dr. Happymon Jacob, go ahead.
I think I think the message from what is happening in Taiwan is pretty clear. That India took a pretty much neutral stand when it came to the Ukraine war that Russia conducted, that Russia is still conducting in Ukraine. And I think a lot of international community understood why India was doing what it was doing. I'm not so sure we should be we should be hesitant about putting out certain statements about Taiwan and the Chinese aggression and what China has been doing around the world. I think the time has come that we called the Chinese aggression for what it is, not just on our border but around the world. Because if we don't speak up, when there is a repeat of what happened in 2020, there is nobody going to be speaking up for us. I think that is point number one. And secondly, I think if Taiwan can stand up to China, why can't we stand up to China? The reality is that if we are ambiguous in our arguments, in our sort of statements about what China is doing on the line of actual control, then China is going to make use of that. There is not going to be any domestic consensus within India about what China is doing. So it's one thing to sort of say that, all right, we will sort of ban certain Chinese apps, we'll be careful about Chinese investment. I think that's not good enough. I think we're going to be more clear about what China is doing, and it's not just vis-a-vis India. So we go to sort of, we put out certain statements so that when China does the same thing vis-a-vis us tomorrow, people will stand by us.
That's a very interesting point, and I do believe that that we have been somewhat diffident, by turns taking on China, and then by turns sort of being a little more diffident than we should certainly. But Ms. Curtis, I'll give you the last word. You are expecting payback. We don't know, as you said, what shape that payback may take. But do you believe that this is an inflection point, or do you believe that Speaker Pelosi's visit by itself is a kind of little drop in the ocean when it comes to the containment, as it were, of Chinese, what I call neo-imperialism?
I think it's an example of the new kind of escalated competition that you have between the US and China. It's not going away anytime soon, but the United States will need to show resolve. As we talked about, and I think Arun agreed with me, we've seen increasing aggression toward Taiwan from China. The U.S., has to answer this. It has to show support for Taiwan. Hasn't changed its one China policy. That still stands. But at the same time, the U.S. has to meet this increased aggression that we see coming from China. One last point, Barkha, if I can. Just to correct you, the U.S. is not back in business with Pakistan. You will never see the kind of economic military assistance going to Pakistan from the United States that you saw in the early days after 9/11. Arun is right. The U.S. does have to fly drones over Pakistani airspace, but that doesn't mean that the U.S. is in any kind of deep, meaningful kind of relationship with Pakistan. Things have to stay at a certain level for the U.S. to retain that access to the airspace. But certainly there's no question that the U.S. is back in business. And just
it's not the old days where the Pakistan military made itself somewhat indispensable to the Americans for whatever it needed to do or achieve in Afghanistan. There's that apprehension, I know, in India, certainly.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think the point with Zawahiri is the fact that he was in the heart of Kabul, being protected by Sirajuddin Haqqani, a senior leader in the Taliban government, demonstrating that they're still allied and we still face a very serious terrorist threat in Afghanistan.
Well, that's good to know. I wasn't making a categorical statement, Lisa, but just sort of reflecting the speculation that has been, raised in several strategic circles within India and indeed in Pakistan. There are Pakistanis also who are wondering to what extent and who knew, how much did they know. But I think both you and Ambassador Singh make the great point about why would the Americans trust the Pakistanis at the highest level with that information. But lots of seismic shifts taking place in the sort of geopolitical stratosphere. Thank you. We leave it there. Ambassador Arun Singh, Lisa Curtis, to Sana Hashmi, and to Happymon Jacob. Thank you. And to everybody else, thank you for watching. Have a great evening. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.